I knew the moment the laughter hit my back that something was wrong, but I didn't expect the words that followed to slice straight through me. One second I was reaching for a drink at the crowded rooftop bar, and the next, my girlfriend's voice, far too loud, far too amused, cut through the music. "Oh, please," she said, waving her hand toward me like I was some pathetic punchline. "He could never satisfy anyone. Trust me, I've tried." The laughter around her wasn't even cruel. It was careless, the kind that stings worse because people don't even realize how deep it lands. I froze. For a moment I couldn't tell if she was drunk, joking, or simply showing me a side of her I'd been too blind to see. My chest felt tight, not just with embarrassment, but with that familiar ache that comes when someone hits exactly where you're weakest. I'd never told her much about my insecurities, yet somehow she'd found the one spot that could collapse me and chose to press down on it in front of friends, co-workers, strangers, anyone lucky enough to witness my humiliation. I didn't look at her right away. Instead, I caught a different pair of eyes watching me from across the group. Her older sister, Lena. Unlike the others, she wasn't laughing. She leaned back slightly, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Not pitying, not amused, observing, studying the moment like there was something important buried in it. My girlfriend was still talking when I finally stepped away. Voices blurred behind me. The cool night air outside didn't help much. My face was burning with the kind of shame that turns your stomach. I tried to steady my breathing, gripping the railing, forcing myself not to replay her words. But they clung to me anyway. A few minutes later, I saw her walk inside, phone pressed to her ear. She didn't glance my way. She didn't notice I'd left. She didn't care. I was contemplating slipping out unnoticed when Lena appeared beside me. I hadn't heard her approach. She moved quietly, like she didn't want to startle me. A strand of dark hair blew across her face as she looked up at me, and for a moment, I felt something strange, like she knew exactly what kind of wreckage I was hiding beneath my forced calm. "You don't have to pretend that didn't hurt," she said softly, and the sincerity in her voice cut deeper than the insult had. I swallowed, unsure what to say. I barely knew her beyond quick hellos at family dinners and the polite nods we exchanged at gatherings. She'd always carried a sort of quiet confidence, the kind that made people listen when she spoke. Tonight, though, she looked almost conflicted, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment but wasn't sure she wanted to witness it. When I didn't answer, she stepped closer, not invading my space, just near enough that I felt a pull I didn't understand. The scent of her perfume reached me, subtle and warm. There wasn't anything overtly sexual about the moment, but there was tension, the kind that catches you off guard because it isn't supposed to be there. She looked up at me, eyes steady, voice low enough that no one else could hear. "You know what she said isn't true." I let out a humorless laugh. "Doesn't matter. People heard it. They'll believe it." Her gaze didn't waver. "Only if you let them." I was about to respond when she leaned in just a fraction, her lips barely curving into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like a secret, a decision, a spark. "Funny," she murmured, her voice brushing warm against my ear. "I think you could prove her wrong." My breath caught, not because she sounded flirtatious, though there was heat beneath her words, but because of the certainty in her tone, the way she said it like she knew something her sister didn't, something I didn't. By the time I gathered myself enough to look at her, she was already straightening, the mysterious calm returning to her features. She gave me a final searching glance, then walked back inside with the kind of poise that made it impossible to read her intentions. I stood there long after she left, the city lights blurring around me, her words looping through my mind with a pull I couldn't shake. She didn't say it like a tease. She didn't say it like a joke. She said it like a truth she was waiting for me to discover. And for the first time that night, I found myself wondering, what exactly did Lena know that I didn't? I spent the next morning trying to shove the entire night out of my head, but humiliation has a way of lingering in the places you don't want it to. I kept replaying the way people laughed, The way my girlfriend's voice sharpened when she wanted to show off, and worst of all, the way Lena's whisper still burned warm against my ear. I didn't know what she'd meant. I didn't know if she'd been trying to comfort me or provoke something. All I knew was that her words clung to me longer than the insult that caused them. I avoided both sisters the entire day. I ignored the group chat. I silenced notifications. I convinced myself the smartest thing to do was to disappear, keep my head down, and wait for the embarrassment to fade. But right around lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't expected to see. Lena. It wasn't a flirty message, no teasing, no suggestion hiding between the lines. Just a simple sentence that somehow felt heavier than it should have. Can we meet? I need to talk to you about something important. I stared at it for longer than I'd admit. A part of me wondered if this was some twisted follow-up to last night, some awkward attempt at checking on the guy her sister had torn apart. Another part of me, one I wasn't proud of, remembered the way she'd looked at me. Not pitying, not amused, just knowing. Like she'd been waiting for the moment I'd finally see something I'd missed. I typed a reply before I could overthink it. Where? 15 minutes later, I was sitting across from her at a quiet cafe tucked away from the main street. She'd chosen a corner booth, away from windows, away from eyes. When she looked up at me, there was no smile, just that same unreadable calm she'd worn the night before. You came, she said, sounding more relieved than surprised. I shrugged lightly, trying to keep things neutral. You said it was important. It is. She folded her hands on the table, her fingers tapping lightly, anxious, though she tried to hide it. But before I tell you anything, I need you to understand that this isn't about last night. That comment wasn't the first time she's done something like that. It's just the first time you saw it clearly. A quiet tension pulled at my shoulders. What do you mean? Lena exhaled slowly, like she'd rehearsed this conversation and still didn't know where to start. She's been doing this for months, undermining you, making jokes about you when you weren't around, hinting at things she knew would get under people's skin, planting seeds. Her voice lowered, steady but edged with anger. She's been sabotaging you behind your back. I felt a cold flush move through me. Why would she do that? Control, Lena said immediately, as if she'd known the answer long before I asked. It's how she keeps people close. The worse you feel about yourself, the less likely you are to leave her. It's the same pattern she's had with every person she's dated. My throat tightened. Part of me wanted to deny it, defend the woman I'd been trying so hard to love. Another part, the part that remembered every moment I felt small without knowing why, recognized the truth in Lena's voice. I leaned back slowly. Why are you telling me this? She hesitated, eyes flicking away for just a second. Because I should have said something earlier. I watched her do this to someone else once, someone who didn't recover from it easily. I swore I wouldn't stay silent again. There was something else in her tone, something heavier, something personal. I didn't know her well enough to piece it together, but it settled between us like a shadow. And last night, she added quietly, she crossed a line she shouldn't have crossed. Not with you, not with anyone. Her gaze lifted back to mine, steady and unblinking. There was no flirtation in it now, just intensity, concern, and something that felt almost protective. I swallowed. Your message said this was important. Is there more? Lena nodded slowly. There is, but not yet. Not until you're ready to hear all of it. A strange chill ran through me at her words. She wasn't just talking about my girlfriend. She wasn't talking about gossip or family drama. There was something deeper she hadn't said, something she was hiding behind that calm exterior. And for the first time since the night before, I realized this wasn't just about defending me. There was something Lena needed from me too, something she wasn't ready to reveal, something that made me wonder if I should be afraid or grateful that she'd chosen me to tell. I didn't expect to meet with Lena again so soon, But the way she'd left things hanging, like she was carrying the weight of a truth she wasn't sure I could handle, pulled me back in before I had time to second-guess it. By early evening, we were sitting on a quiet park bench beneath a canopy of trees, far enough from anyone who might overhear. She'd chosen another secluded spot, another place where her voice could drop low and serious without interruption. The moment I sat down beside her, she didn't bother with small talk. Her eyes were fixed on the pond in front of us, but her voice carried a sharp clarity that told me she'd been waiting to say this for a long time. "You deserve to know the full picture," she said. "Not just what she did last night, but why she did it, and how long it's been building." A knot tightened in my stomach. "Then tell me." "She does this every time she feels someone slipping out of her control," Lena said, finally turning to me. "She starts by making small jokes, little digs that seem harmless. Then she makes people question themselves. After that, she uses their insecurities to keep them close. She breaks them down just enough that they cling to her for validation." I felt the sting of recognition, the way she'd subtly criticized choices I made, the times I'd apologized without understanding what I'd done wrong, the moments I'd felt guilty for things that weren't mine to carry. It all aligned with an uncomfortable precision. "She's done it to friends," Lena continued. "She's done it to partners. And every time she does it, it gets worse. Last night wasn't an accident. It was escalation." I rubbed a hand over my face, frustration mixing with something heavier. I kept thinking I was imagining it, that I was overreacting. That's what she counts on. Lena's voice softened, but her jaw tightened with familiar anger. She wants you confused. She wants you doubting yourself, because if you doubt yourself, you'll never doubt her. Her gaze locked onto mine then, sharp and unflinching. For a moment, there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of guilt or sadness I couldn't quite place. "And you were starting to pull away from her," she said quietly. I could see it. She could see it. That's why she humiliated you. It was her way of pulling you back down before you realized you deserved better. The words hit deeper than I expected, not because they were harsh, because they were true. Still, something didn't add up. "Why do you care this much?" I asked. "We barely know each other. You could have stayed out of it." Lena's eyes flicked away, her fingers curling around the edge of the bench. "Because I've been on the other side of it," she said softly. "I know what it feels like to have someone twist your reality until you can't trust your own thoughts. I watched her do it before, and I didn't stop it. I'm not letting her do it again." Her voice wavered slightly, not weakness, but restraint, like she was holding back a deeper layer she wasn't ready to reveal. I studied her in the dim evening light. There was something magnetic about her, not in a romantic way, not yet, but in the way she held herself, the way she spoke, the way she looked at me like she could see past the defenses I didn't even realize I had. It made the air between us feel warmer than it should have, thicker somehow. "Last night," I said slowly, "what you whispered, what did you mean by that?" Her lips curved, just barely, like I'd asked a question she'd expected. "Exactly what it sounded like," she said. "You're not the man she made you feel like. She talks big, but she doesn't know half the truth about you. That almost sounds like you do." "I know enough," she murmured, her gaze dropping briefly to my mouth before lifting again. It was subtle, so subtle I might have imagined it, but the moment carried a spark of heat that crawled down my spine. But before anything could linger, her expression shifted back into something more serious. "I came forward because you deserve to know what's been happening," she said. "Before you lose yourself the way others did. Before she takes something from you that's harder to get back." "Like what?" I asked. "Yourself," she said simply. "Your confidence, your voice, your sense of who you are." Her words sank into me with a weight that made it hard to breathe. And then, right when I opened my mouth to ask her more, to push deeper into that hidden tension pulsing beneath her calm exterior, she stood, brushing invisible dust from her hands. "That's enough for tonight," she said softly. "You needed the truth. Now you have it. But there's more, and I don't know if you're ready for that part yet. She gave me one last lingering look, a mixture of warning and something almost tender, then walked away before I could stop her. And I sat there long after she disappeared, sensing, without knowing why, that whatever she hadn't told me was far more dangerous than anything she'd said out loud. I didn't plan to confront her that night. I told myself I'd wait until morning, until my thoughts were calmer, until I wasn't carrying the heavy, unsettling echo of Lena's voice telling me I was being manipulated. But the second I walked into the apartment and saw her curled on the couch, scrolling her phone like nothing had happened, something inside me snapped with a clarity that felt almost physical. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Hey," she said casually, her voice light, unbothered. "You disappeared last night. Kind of rude, honestly." The casual tone made my jaw clench. I stood there for a full minute, waiting for her to acknowledge the scene she'd caused, the humiliation she'd thrown at me like confetti. She didn't. She just kept scrolling. Finally, I said, "We need to talk." She sighed dramatically and set her phone down with the same energy someone uses when told they've forgotten to take out the trash. "If this is about last night, I swear you're being dramatic. It was a joke." "A joke?" I repeated, feeling heat climb up my neck. "In front of everyone? You said I could never satisfy anyone." She rolled her eyes. "I didn't mean it seriously. People were laughing, so it obviously landed." "Landed?" I echoed. "You humiliated me." Her expression sharpened, shifting from dismissive to annoyed. "God, you're sensitive. Lena put this in your head, didn't she?" The change in her tone was so abrupt I almost missed the way she tightened her jaw, the way her shoulders stiffened. "Why would Lena care about what you said?" I asked slowly. "Oh, please." She waved her hand in the air. "She's obsessed with ruining things for me. She always has been. You think she's trying to help you? No. She wants you to hate me. She always meddles in my relationships, because she can't keep her own." Her bitterness made the air thick, and maybe if I hadn't spent hours replaying Lena's calm sincerity, I might have hesitated. But the contrast between the two sisters, one steady and honest, one sharp and defensive, made the truth feel painfully clear. I stepped closer. "She told me you've been bad-mouthing me for months." Her eyebrows shot up. "Oh my God, you believe her? Should I not?" "She's jealous," she snapped. "She wants people to see me as unstable or cruel because it makes her feel superior. She twists everything. Everything." She stood, jabbing a finger at my chest. "The problem isn't me. It's you. You're insecure. You hear one thing you don't like and you cling to it because it confirms your deepest fear, that you're not enough." A cold, hollow feeling opened inside me, because that was exactly what Lena warned me about. The twisting, the turning things back on me, the weaponizing of the very insecurities she'd sharpened. I shook my head. "I'm done." That word froze her. "Done?" "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "We're done." She stared at me like she couldn't process it. "You're breaking up with me? Over a joke?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. I grabbed my jacket, headed toward the door, and felt her glare burning into my back. She didn't call after me. She didn't apologize. She didn't even move. She just watched me walk out. And for a brief moment, I felt something like relief. But it didn't last. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages, notifications firing so quickly they tangled into one long thread of disbelief. My closest friends, co-workers, even casual acquaintances were all saying variations of the same thing. "How could you? Did you really cheat with her sister?" Man, that's low. At first I didn't even understand what I was reading. Then someone sent a screenshot. My ex had spent the night telling everyone I'd been sleeping with Lena, that I'd been caught, that I'd broken her heart, that she'd been forced to expose the truth. She spun her betrayal into mine so fast it almost sounded believable. And the worst part? People were already choosing sides, and not mine. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I sat there staring at my phone, drowning in a lie I had no way to stop. A hard knock hit my door minutes later. I opened it to find Lena standing there, eyes blazing with a fury so sharp it almost startled me. "I warned her once," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "I told her if she ever tore someone down again, I wouldn't stay silent." Her hands were shaking, not with fear, but with anger she'd been holding for too long. "She did this to you because she's scared," Lena said, "but she has no idea who she's dealing with this time." Her voice dropped lower, steadier. "I'm done protecting her. She needs to be exposed." Something in her tone, dark, resolute, made my pulse thrum. Not fear, something closer to anticipation. Because for the first time, I realized Lena wasn't stepping in out of kindness. She was stepping in because she had her own demons to settle. I didn't think it was possible to feel punched by words on a screen, but that morning proved me wrong. Every notification felt like another blow. Friends demanding explanations, co-workers sending veiled warnings about professional conduct, distant acquaintances suddenly deciding they cared about my moral compass. My ex had twisted the story into something far more dramatic than the truth, and she'd done it with the confidence of someone who'd perfected the art of lying just enough to sound believable. The worst part wasn't even the accusations. It was how easily people seemed to accept them. Like they'd been waiting for a reason to doubt me. Like every insecurity I'd kept buried had suddenly been pulled into daylight where everyone could poke at it. I was still scrolling through the wreckage when Lena stepped into my apartment, her presence hitting the room like a gust of controlled fire. She shut the door behind her with a firmness that told me she wasn't here to tiptoe around anything. "She's out of her mind," I muttered, rubbing my eyes. "She's telling everyone I slept with you." "I know," Lena said, her voice clipped with anger. "People have already been calling me, asking if it's true." I looked up sharply. "And what did you say?" Her jaw tightened. "That it's none of their business, and that if anyone wants to repeat her lies, they can do it while looking me in the eye." Her tone was unwavering. There was power in it, the kind that doesn't need volume to feel dangerous. I blinked. "You're surprisingly calm for someone being dragged into this mess." She sat down across from me, crossing one leg over the other. Even in her anger, there was a poise to her, a self-control that felt almost magnetic. "I'm not calm," she said quietly. "I'm furious, but I've seen this before. I watched her do the same thing to someone years ago, and I did nothing. I won't make that mistake again." There it was again, that flicker of guilt she carried like a shadow. I leaned forward. "You said you saw her ruin someone. What did she do?" Lena hesitated, eyes darkening in thought. "She spread a rumor that her partner was cheating. She made him out to be unstable and manipulative. Eventually, she pushed him so far into a corner that he lost his job, his friends, his confidence, and the whole time, she acted like she was the victim." My chest tightened. "Why didn't you stop her?" Her voice came out low, almost raw. "Because back then, I was too close to who she was. I didn't realize how wrong it was until it was too late." There was weight in that confession, more than she was saying. Something hinted at shared darkness, old habits she'd clawed her way out of. I didn't push, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her mouth. She wasn't just angry at her sister, she was angry at herself. "And now she's doing it again," Lena said, lifting her gaze to mine. "This time to someone who doesn't deserve it, someone who tried to love her." Her last words softened unexpectedly, and for a moment the room felt smaller, warmer, charged with an undertone I couldn't quite name. There was no flirting, nothing overt, but the connection between us had shifted, threading something quiet and electric through the air. I exhaled slowly. "What do we do?" Lena's expression hardened with decision. "We don't let her control the narrative. We expose what she's been doing. Not with anger, not with accusations, with proof." "Proof?" She nodded. "Screenshots, messages, people she's lied to or lied about, the patterns, All of it. You're not the first she's tried to break, and if we gather enough, she won't be able to twist this back on you. The tension in my chest loosened by a fraction. You're really willing to go against your own sister for this? For the truth, she said, and for you, whether you realize it or not. The honesty in her tone caught me off guard. It wasn't romantic, but it was intimate in a way that struck deeper than attraction. It felt like someone stepping into a fire willingly, not for what they hoped to gain, but for what they refused to let burn. She stood then, moving closer, her presence grounding me more than any words had. "We'll fix this," she said softly, "but you need to be ready for what comes with confronting her. She doesn't go down quietly." I looked up at her, feeling the weight of everything pressing between us, the humiliation, the betrayal, the familiar ache of wanting to be believed. But beneath it all, there was something else, something steadier. Trust, the kind that forms not from comfort, but from shared battle lines. Lena held my gaze another second before stepping back. "I'll explain the plan tomorrow. Tonight, just breathe. Let me handle the fallout." And as she left the apartment, closing the door with careful finality, I realized something that sent a strange pulse through me. My ex had declared me the villain, but Lena was ready to fight beside me, and that made her sister's lies feel suddenly, dangerously fragile. Lena arrived the next evening with a determined calm that didn't match the storm she'd been navigating on my behalf. She didn't knock timidly. She knocked like someone who'd made up her mind, someone who'd already committed to whatever came next. When I opened the door, she stepped inside with a small binder tucked under her arm and the faintest hint of tension in her shoulders, like she was preparing for a fight she'd been postponing for years. "We're going to do this the right way," she said before I could even greet her. "Clean, quiet, and thorough." The binder hit my coffee table with a soft thud. When I opened it, I expected chaos, screenshots, scribbled notes, dramatic claims. Instead, everything was organized into neat sections, each labeled with a level of precision that made my stomach twist. "You already prepared all this?" I asked. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't look away. "When I told you I wasn't going to stay silent again, I meant it. I've been collecting things for a while. Not for this exact scenario, but just in case she ever crossed a line I couldn't ignore." I raised an eyebrow. "How long is a while?" She hesitated. "Long enough to recognize the patterns the moment they started repeating with you." There was something intimate in the way she said it. Not romantic, not flirtatious, but deeply personal, like she'd been holding a worry for longer than she wanted to admit. I flipped through the binder slowly. Messages from people her sister had misled. Screenshots of jokes that were harmless, only until you saw the frequency and intention behind them. Snippets of conversations where she'd twisted facts just enough to make someone question themselves. Documentation of past relationships she'd ended by burning the other person's reputation to ash. "Lena," I whispered, "this is a lot." "Exactly," she replied, "and it's why we have to be smart." She sat across from me, leaning forward slightly. "We're not going to scream at her. We're not going to make threats. That just helps her spin the story. We're going to show people the truth in a way she can't rewrite." As she explained the plan, how we'd compile a timeline, how we'd gather statements, how we'd present everything calmly, I found myself watching her more than listening. The intensity of her focus, the quiet strength in her voice, the way she spoke with certainty but never arrogance. She wasn't doing this for attention. She wasn't doing it for revenge. She was doing it because she couldn't stand by and watch someone else get destroyed again. And that kind of loyalty, fierce, unspoken, unwavering, created a different kind of heat in the room. Not sexual exactly, but charged all the same. I felt it every time her knee brushed mine under the table, every time her eyes met mine with a softness she hadn't intended to show. At one point, she paused mid-sentence and looked at me with an expression that almost unsettled me. "There's something you need to understand," she said quietly. "This won't just expose her. It'll expose me, too. I tilted my head. Expose you how? She leaned back, crossing her arms, her eyes drifting away. I know how manipulation works because I used to be closer to it than I like to admit. I learned the patterns the hard way. I learned how they form, how they spread, and how not to become them. Her voice dropped, barely audible. But people don't forget who you used to be, even when you've changed. Something inside me softened. I didn't know what she meant fully, but I sensed it wasn't an exaggeration. It was a confession, a piece of something darker she hadn't shown me yet. I touched her arm gently, not a bold move, just an anchoring one. You're not like her. She looked up sharply, almost startled by the certainty in my voice. You don't know that. Actually, I said, letting the quiet stretch between us. I think I do. For a moment she didn't speak. She just held my gaze, her expression caught between gratitude and something more fragile. Hope, maybe, or fear. Then she cleared her throat, pulling herself back into the task. We should get everything into a digital timeline. People respond to structure. As we worked side by side, our shoulders brushing occasionally, the silence carried a new kind of awareness. It wasn't sexual tension in the obvious sense. It was the kind that grows between two people fighting the same enemy, the kind forged from trust, built under pressure. But the air was warm, undeniably warm, and every time she leaned over me to look at the screen, I felt the heat of her closeness linger like a question neither of us knew how to answer yet. Hours passed. The timeline grew. Evidence stacked. Truth took shape. At the end of the night, Lena closed the binder with a soft, satisfied click. Tomorrow, she said, standing slowly, we start the part she won't be able to escape from. She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. She didn't turn, but her voice was low, careful. Before we do this, I need to ask you something. I stood. What is it? Her shoulders rose with a slow, steady breath. If you knew the whole truth about me, she said, would you still trust me? A chill moved through me, gentle but deep, because the way she asked wasn't hypothetical. It was personal. It was a warning. And whatever truth she was holding back, I had the feeling it was going to change everything. The next evening felt like the slow climb of a roller coaster, every minute pulling us higher towards something inevitable, unavoidable, and terrifying in a way that made adrenaline hum under my skin. Lena didn't knock this time. She stepped into my apartment with decisive steps, her jaw set, her eyes sharp. She wasn't dressed up or dramatic, jeans, a simple sweater, hair pulled back, but there was something undeniably intense about the way she carried herself. This is the night, she said quietly. We do this calmly, clearly, and without giving her room to twist a single word. My pulse kicked harder. You're sure we're ready? She nodded once. More than ready. But the truth was, neither of us knew what was waiting on the other side. This wasn't just about revealing screenshots or messages. It was about pulling the curtain back on someone who had perfected the performance of innocence, someone who could cry on command, someone who had built her entire identity on being the victim, even when she was the cause. Lena and I drove to our mutual friend's apartment, the place where the group always gathered. My ex was already there, surrounded by people she had successfully turned against me, people who now looked at her with sympathy and at the doorway with suspicion the moment I appeared. She stood quickly, eyes wide with manufactured betrayal. Oh my God! Him! Really? You brought him here? Her voice cracked perfectly, like a rehearsed line. Some of the group shifted uncomfortably. A few glared at me outright. But Lena stepped forward, shoulders squared, voice steady. We're here because things have been said that need to be addressed. All of us deserve the truth. Her sister scoffed. Truth? Please. You're just angry I told everyone what you two were doing behind my back. The accusation was thrown like a spear, sharp and meant to wound. But Lena didn't flinch. Her composure only made my ex angrier. It disrupted her rhythm, her confidence. Manipulators hate losing control of the tone. Lena opened the binder. Let's start with this. She passed the binder to the closest person, letting it circulate. Confusion grew. Whispered questions floated around the room. Screenshots, dates, comments, patterns, all slowly revealing that the version of events my ex had shared was far from the truth. My ex's face paled, then flushed, then hardened. You've been spying on me? I've been watching you hurt people, Lena corrected, her voice low but devastatingly calm. Watching you twist their insecurities, their trust, their reputations. And this time, you targeted someone who didn't deserve it. My ex's voice rose to a shrill pitch. You're lying. You've always been jealous of me. Someone in the group spoke up, quietly, hesitantly. Actually, some of this looks familiar. Another person nodded. She did something similar to me last year. And just like that, the unraveling began. One thread pulled, then another, and another. People started realizing they'd been manipulated too. That small doubts planted in their minds weren't random. That things said in confidence might not have been true. My ex's outrage began shifting into desperation. You're listening to her? She hates me. She's always hated me. Lena finally stepped forward, close enough that the tension between them crackled like static. I never hated you, she said quietly. I protected you, even when you didn't deserve it, even when you hurt people. But I'm done letting you destroy anyone else's life. My ex opened her mouth to argue, but Lena cut her off with the final blow. You want to talk about secrets? Lena asked, her voice dropping into something icy. Then let's talk about the therapy notes. The room fell silent. My stomach dropped. My ex froze. Lena continued, her tone now trembling with a pain I hadn't heard before. You used my therapist's notes, the ones I trusted you with years ago, against people. You took details from my private life and used them to manipulate situations, conversations, even relationships. Someone whispered, What the hell? My ex stumbled backward, breath shaking. You weren't supposed to know about that. I wasn't supposed to? Lena's voice cracked for the first time. You weaponized my worst moments. You used me. The silence was suffocating. No one in the room could look at my ex the same way. Not with sympathy, not with belief. Only disbelief and disgust. One of our friends finally stepped forward. I think we've heard enough. And it was over. Just like that. The lies, the narrative, the fragile world she'd built. It all collapsed in minutes. My ex tried to speak again, but no one listened. No one defended her. No one believed her anymore. Lena looked at me, not with triumph, but with a strange, exhausted sadness. She'd won, but it hadn't looked like victory. It looked like release. When we walked out together, the night air felt colder, sharper. We didn't speak for a while. We didn't need to. Everything had changed in that room. For her, for me, and for whatever lived between us now, humming warm and complicated beneath the silence. The strange thing about the truth is that even when it finally comes out, clean, undeniable, laid bare in front of everyone, it doesn't bring the instant relief you expect. Walking out of that apartment with Lena beside me felt less like victory and more like stepping away from wreckage still smoldering behind us. The air was cool, the streetlights sharp, but I carried a heaviness in my chest that didn't let up, even as distance grew between us and the confrontation. Lena walked in silence, her expression unreadable again, but this time I sensed the weight behind it. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something quieter, something bruised. The truth she'd exposed wasn't just about her sister, it was a truth about herself too, something deeply personal she'd been forced to reveal in front of a room full of people who didn't deserve to hear it. I finally broke the silence when we reached my car. Are you okay? She gave a soft, humorless laugh. You keep asking me that. I don't think I've had a real answer for you yet. I leaned against the car door, studying her closely. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes slightly distant. And despite everything she'd done, everything she'd risked, She looked like someone expecting blame instead of gratitude, like she was waiting for me to step back from her now that I'd seen too much. "You did something incredibly difficult tonight," I said quietly. "You didn't just expose her, you exposed yourself." Lena looked at me sharply, surprise flickering across her face. "And that doesn't bother you?" "No," I answered without hesitation. "It makes me trust you more." She inhaled like she wasn't prepared for that reply. Her posture softened just a little, the defensive edge melting into something more vulnerable. "Most people don't respond that way," she admitted. "Most people hear about my past and decide it's safer to keep their distance." I shook my head. "Then most people are idiots." A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips, small but real. "Careful," she said, stepping a bit closer. "If you keep saying things like that, I might start believing you." For the first time all night, the tension between us shifted, not the heavy, strained tension of conflict, but something warmer, quieter, charged with unspoken understanding. It wasn't romantic exactly, but it wasn't neutral either. I felt the gravitational pull of her presence again, the closeness that shouldn't have meant anything but somehow did. We stood there a moment longer before she cleared her throat and stepped back. "Go home," she said gently. "Try to rest. Things will feel different tomorrow." She wasn't wrong. By morning, my phone was flooded with apologies, long messages from friends who'd believed the worst far too easily, co-workers offering to clarify the situation, people who'd once sided with my ex now scrambling to distance themselves from her. I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound hollow. My professional reputation began to untangle as well. The co-workers who'd been awkward now felt almost embarrassingly polite. One of them even said, "We had no idea what she was capable of," like that somehow absolved him of believing a lie without question. But even as everything around me settled, something inside me didn't. Because the real shift wasn't in the social fallout. It was in the way I now saw Lena. It was in the memory of how she stood between me and the damage I couldn't stop on my own. It was in the gentleness beneath her steel, the grief beneath her strength, the quiet confession she'd shared with me and no one else. Later that afternoon, she texted me. Just one line. "Are you free tonight? We should talk. No urgency, no doom. Just a softness I wasn't used to from her." When we met at her place, small, neat and warm in a way her sister's apartment had never been, the air felt charged in a familiar yet unsettling way. Lena brewed tea while I sat on her couch, and the quiet between us wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like something building. When she finally sat beside me, she didn't speak at first. She just exhaled, eyes meeting mine with a depth I hadn't seen before. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. "Something I should have said earlier." My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. "What is it?" I asked. She looked down at her hands, twisting them slightly, a small gesture for anyone else, but for her, it felt monumental. "The intensity you saw last night, the way I fought, the way I confronted her. You weren't wrong to sense something else there." She lifted her gaze slowly. "I wasn't just protecting you," she whispered. "I was trying to protect a part of myself I thought I'd buried. And now, I'm afraid you're starting to see it." Her voice trembled. Not much, just enough to reveal the truth she was still trying to hide. And in that moment, I realized the aftermath wasn't over. Not even close. Something deeper was pulling us forward, toward the secret Lena had been dancing around since the moment she first approached me on that rooftop. Something that would change the way I saw her forever. Lena didn't speak right away. She just sat there beside me, fingers knotted together, shoulders tense beneath the soft spill of lamplight. I'd never seen her look so unsure. Not even when she'd confronted her sister in front of a room full of people. Not even when she exposed the truth she'd been carrying like a scar. This was different. This was personal in a way that made the air between us feel strangely intimate, quiet, warm, fragile. "I need you to let me say this all the way through," she whispered, eyes still lowered. If I stop, I won't be able to start again. I nodded, heartbeat steady but strong. I'm listening. She drew a long breath, fingers finally loosening. You asked why I cared so much, why I stepped in, why I'd risk everything to expose her, and I told you pieces of the truth, but not the whole thing. Her voice trembled slightly, just enough to reveal how deeply this cut. Years ago, she continued, I wasn't so different from her. The words hit like cold water, not because they seemed impossible, but because I felt her sincerity the moment she said them. I learned how to manipulate before I learned how to be honest, she said, her hands opening palm up on her lap. I knew how to twist a story, how to shape a conversation to fit what I wanted. I learned it from the same place she did, our childhood, our home, the way we were taught that control was the only way to stay safe. She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with something she refused to let fall. But while she leaned into it, I broke under it. Something happened. Someone exposed me. Someone I cared about. Someone who refused to play along anymore. I lost them. And losing them was the only thing that forced me to see the damage I was capable of. There was no defensiveness in her voice, no attempt to soften the confession, just raw honesty, the kind that felt heavier than any accusation. I went to therapy. I rebuilt myself from nothing. I forced myself to be brutally honest, even when it made me sick, even when it made people walk away. She laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement. It was exhaustion. People don't like being around someone who admits they used to be a monster. I shook my head, my voice quiet. You're not a monster. You didn't know me then, she said, finally lifting her gaze to mine. And when I saw her doing the same things, cutting down partners, twisting the truth, weaponizing insecurities, it terrified me, because I recognized every move. She exhaled slowly. I didn't step in just to protect you. I stepped in because I saw myself in her. And I thought, maybe if I could stop her, it would make up for the person I used to be. Silence settled over the room, thick and meaningful. I wasn't repulsed. I wasn't afraid. If anything, her vulnerability pulled me closer in a way I couldn't have anticipated. The version of Lena I'd come to know wasn't a manipulator. She was fiercely honest, painfully self-aware, and stronger than she realized. She must have misread my silence, because she looked away, her voice tightening. You see now why I asked if you'd still trust me. People who know my past tend to assume the worst. They think I'm dangerous, or unpredictable, or... Stop, I said gently. She froze, her breath catching. I reached out and touched her hand, just barely, but enough for her eyes to flick back to mine. You're not your past, I said. And if anything, the fact that you fought your way out of it, that makes me trust you more, not less. Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her face. She didn't pull her hand away. She didn't speak. She just looked at me with an intensity that felt almost intimate. I'm not afraid of who you were, I said. I'm grateful for who you are now. The room felt warmer after that, full of something unspoken and undeniable. Not lust exactly, not romance, but a pull that settled deep in my chest. The kind of pull that forms between two people who have seen each other at vulnerable angles and didn't recoil. Lena's voice was soft when she finally spoke. You have no idea how rare it is to hear that. Maybe, I replied, but that doesn't make it any less true. She exhaled shakily, the tension draining from her shoulders, replaced by something quieter. Relief, maybe. Gratitude. Or something more dangerous. Because the way she looked at me then, it wasn't neutral. It wasn't distant. It wasn't safe. There was heat there, subtle but unmistakable. A spark she wasn't ready to name. A spark I wasn't sure I should touch, but couldn't ignore. Before I could say anything else, she stood slowly, crossing the room to steady herself. There's one more thing you need to know, she said, her back partially turned to me. Something about me, and about the night I whispered to you on that rooftop. I sat forward, pulse steady, but strong. What is it? She looked over her shoulder, eyes dark and unreadable. When I told you that you could prove her wrong, it wasn't about sex, and it wasn't about me wanting you. She paused, the next words coming out slower. It was about who you are, what you're capable of, what she was afraid you'd realize. She turned fully then, facing me with a seriousness that made my breath still. But now, I'm afraid you're starting to prove something else, something I didn't expect. My mouth went dry. What am I proving? Her voice dropped to a whisper, that I might have been wrong about not wanting you. And the room went silent, warm, electric, charged, as everything between us shifted into something neither of us could pretend not to feel anymore. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Lena's words hung in the air like a held breath, quiet, fragile, but with enough weight to shift the ground beneath us. She didn't look away, didn't soften the intensity in her gaze. It was the first time she'd let herself be openly vulnerable without immediately bracing for impact. And I felt that vulnerability like a pull in my chest, steady and warm. Lena, I started, not even sure where the sentence was going. She shook her head slightly, as if warning me not to jump to conclusions. Don't misunderstand, she said, her voice low but steady. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not expecting anything. I just needed to be honest. For once. I stood slowly, not to close the distance, but to level the field, so she wouldn't be the only one exposed. Honest about what changed? I asked. Her eyes softened, though her posture stayed tense. Honest about the fact that when I first approached you on that rooftop, I wasn't thinking about attraction. I wasn't thinking about you as someone I could want. I was thinking about what you needed to hear, what you deserved to hear. And tonight, after everything we went through, I realized something unexpected. She stepped closer, just enough for her presence to warm the space between us. You didn't break under what she did to you. You didn't turn bitter or cruel or vindictive. You didn't even take revenge. You stood up for yourself with clarity and dignity. A quiet breath escaped her. That strength, I didn't expect it. I didn't prepare for it. I felt my pulse steady into something calm, grounded. And now? Now, she said softly, I find myself looking at you differently, and it scares me more than anything else did in the last few weeks. The confession settled into the room, warm and honest and complicated. There was attraction humming between us, yes, unignorable, simmering at the edges. But it wasn't the point. It wasn't the headline. What mattered was the truth behind it, the kind that didn't depend on romance or expectation. I don't want to become someone you have to be wary of, she whispered. I don't want my past, or my mistakes, or my family's mess to bleed into whatever peace you're finally getting back. Her voice broke slightly at the end, and that small fracture hit me harder than any dramatic collapse could have. I stepped closer, but not too close, respecting the space between confession and pressure. Lena, I said gently, you've done more to protect me in a few weeks than she ever did in months. And not because you wanted something from me, because it was the right thing. You don't scare me. Her eyes shone with something warm and surprised. You should know, she said quietly. I didn't expect you to say that. I know. The tension between us eased, not disappearing, but settling into something more natural, something that didn't demand resolution tonight, something that could breathe. We talked for a while after that, softly, honestly, without the weight of accusation or secrets. And when I left her apartment later that night, we didn't kiss. We didn't make promises. We didn't tilt the moment into something it wasn't ready to be. But when I said goodnight, she held my gaze with a look that said she wasn't afraid anymore. And I left with the same quiet certainty. Months passed. The dust settled. My ex faded into the background, her attempts at damage control falling flat against the truth everyone had already seen. Then one afternoon, she appeared outside the cafe where I was working, eyes glossy, voice too soft, apology ready on her tongue. "Can we talk?" she asked, with the kind of desperation that comes only when someone wants back the world they shattered. "I made mistakes. I know that. But if you'd just listen—" I didn't tell her off. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't deliver a speech she'd twist into another wound. I just stood, nodded once, and walked past her. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity, out of finally being free. She called my name once, maybe twice. I didn't look back, and it was the cleanest ending I'd ever had. Weeks later, Lena and I sat on that same rooftop where everything began, quiet, comfortable, watching the city lights glow beneath us. She nudged my shoulder gently. "Do you remember what I told you that night?" I smiled. "Which part?" "The part where I said you could prove her wrong." "I remember." She inhaled slowly, her gaze drifting over the skyline. "Back then, I wasn't talking about sex or confidence or whatever she tried to take from you." She glanced at me, her expression soft. "I was talking about your character, about the kind of man you are, and you proved me right, in ways I didn't expect." Her smile was small, but honest. "I'm glad I was wrong about one more thing, though." "What's that?" "That I couldn't want someone again," she said quietly, "or trust someone, or let someone see who I used to be without running." I didn't answer right away. I didn't have to. The look we shared said everything. We weren't lovers. We weren't a dramatic romance. We were something steadier, more complicated, more real. Two people who survived the same storm and came out stronger because they faced it together. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough.